Hey everyone, welcome to the next session. We've got three really talented marketers, D2C marketers here. I'm Stuart Hillhouse. I'm head of marketing at Demand Curve, and this session is going to be all about D2C, direct to consumer. And we're going to talk about physical products, and we're going to talk about digital products as well. So without further ado, I'll introduce the three handsome dudes in front of you. We got Nick Sharma, who is the founder of Sharma Brands, which operates a portfolio of D2C brands such as Judy, Poo-Pourri, and Hydrant. He also writes a weekly email newsletter to over 50, which is a metabolic health company that uses continuous glucose monitoring to show people how food and exercise impacts their health. So essentially just a pad that goes on your arm, and it's just telling you hour to hour how you're going. There it is. Wow. We definitely want to talk about that. Previously, he was part of the founding team at SkipTheDishes, which was acquired by the food delivery app Just Eat for $200 million, and then was grown to $3 billion in market value over the 5 years previously. We've also got Shaan Puri, who's the co-host of My First Million. He previously founded Bebo, which was then acquired by Twitch, and he's got a whole bunch of other startups under his name. He also writes a weekly newsletter to 26,000 marketers and founders. Welcome all.
What's going on?
Hello.
I'm going to start kind of just going one-on-one and asking specifics about some of the projects you guys are working on, but we'll get more broad afterwards. But Nick, you get to see a lot of D2C companies as an investor and an operator. From the investing point of view, like what are some of the attributes that you look for in the companies you end up investing in?
Initially, and by initially I mean like last year, I was looking a lot at, does this product like deserve to exist? Is there a proven reason, as in, has there been testing done to say that this is something that's actually going to do well? And if there has been, then what is the path of actual go-to-market? I think today when I look at D2C brands, and especially investor decks, I really look for like an understanding of how well this founder or the team that's going to launch it knows their customer, simply because whatever you're probably selling, in I'd say 99% of the cases, it's an almost identical product is available from 10 or 15 other companies. And the real question comes down to like, how well can you build a brand around your customer so that you retain that customer better? I think Levels is actually a really good example of this. Levels came out with their product. They led with education and content, came out with this really good product and iterated really fast. And then, now if you are a Levels customer or in that realm of Levels, you probably get Instagram ads for competitive products, but they will just never win because of how great the Levels brand has become and how they've been able to educate their audience along their journey.
That's what Ben, was that part of
brand.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the punchline is really like brand and customer understanding.
Yeah. Ben, when you joined, was that set in stone or was that part of your doing?
Yeah, it's funny because we've all rallied around this counterintuitive sense of not competing for 3 seconds of attention. So exactly what Nick was saying, where like in your feed, if you ever look at anything related to CGMs, like continuous glucose monitors, you'll just start getting bombarded with search ads, paid digital platform ads. Like it's nonstop. And so our take was always like, we actually don't care about selling a product. That is not our mantra. All we've said is there's this massive epidemic in the world, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but massive epidemic in the world that no one's talking about called the metabolic health crisis. And it affects like pretty much everybody in the world. And we don't understand it yet. It's like driving around a car without any sensors or check engine lights. Like you're in deep trouble. And so we felt this sense of a mission to say, hey, we have to educate the world. We have to be like Paul Revere riding door to door screaming right now, like everybody listen, there's something happening. And with that being the sense where we're just focused on the education component and creating like really academic driven content around it, mostly from the blog. And now it's getting more derivative with fun things like the podcast and everything else we're doing. That's where we said, this is how we can create value for people. And if they want to buy a CGM, we happen to have them, right? So it's sort of flipping the thought process on its head. And by doing that, we've created somewhat of a community that trusts us. And I think that's what's creating our flywheel. So it's interesting to see it happening, but it's exactly what Nick was saying, where it's like, that is what's creating the strength and the glue.
Shaan, how does like consumer SaaS or social products that are still direct to consumer, how do those differ at all? Because in those cases, it is winner take all.
Yeah. First of all, how do I see, how do I get the energy in the chat here? Which chat should I be looking at? Session or public?
Session is all the people in this one.
Okay. If you're in this chat, just smash, I don't know, 1 to 10, how you're feeling is a 10. 10 is you're feeling like I'm feeling. 1 is you're feeling like, this person I see, this mowing the grass out there that looks like they hate their life. All right. I needed that energy. I can't.
Yeah, there we go. 10 squared.
I can't go into a cold room. Okay, so I guess I'll give a tiny bit of background. So on the D2C side, I don't talk much about it on the podcast, but I have a D2C brand. So I don't name which brand, but basically I created a brand with my wife when we had our first kid, and it's a kids brand, and so we grew it from 0 to over over 12 million run rate in 1 year profitably. And so we had to ask ourselves this question: how is this going to grow? Right? That's we have a product that we believe in. We think the market's there. Well, what do we do? And I have a buddy who doesn't really participate in the kind of like online, like circle jerk of Twitter and conferences, and he doesn't really engage. And he's more of like he's just a straight business person, but he's not. And so on Twitter, you'll see fancy strategies. You'll hear community is super important. You'll hear that, you'll hear that Facebook ads are too expensive and they're crashing now. You'll hear all these different narratives. And his narrative was like, look, I think D2C businesses work right now because Facebook ads exist. And, Facebook is the new shelf that you can go put your product in. And you can permissionlessly put your product in. You just have to pay the fee. And he's like, so let's start with that. And if we can't get Facebook to work, we're probably not going to get anything to work. And so we had a very, very simple strategy. Let's go on Facebook. Let's show people our product. Let's show it in action. Let's show why, show customers being excited about our product and why. And then after we do that, let's basically just say, hey, here's here's a product, go buy it. Here's an offer, go buy it. Very, very simple, blocking and tackling, nothing too fancy. And that has worked. We didn't need to do any of the smart stuff that these guys are talking about. You can do all those things. I'm sure they're good, but the basics of going and putting money in the Facebook slot machine and then having it, spit you out a customer is working. And so we really didn't make it too much more complicated than that. And the result, 0 to, an 8-figure a year business profitably in less than 1 year, that's a good result. And that's the result I wanted. And let's keep that going.
When you so you went in with a plan, Shaan, did you also have a abort plan? Like if you threw money at it for however long and you didn't get a certain return, did you have like a do not continue?
I actually tested a product before this. So I tested a product that was like, I saw that because basically the way I worked was backwards from the customer. So I said, okay, the people literally using Facebook are mostly kind of like, everybody uses Facebook, but like one of the dominant demographics on Facebook is like moms, women in the sort of like 30 to 55 range in middle of America. That's like the juiciest segment on Facebook. They'll click everything. They use Facebook all the time. They're not migrating to TikTok and Snapchat at the same speed. So Facebook still works extremely well with that demographic. So I was like, all right, well, who's in that group and what do they care about? And I studied and I saw, there's this thing. And I also wanted personal entertainment. So I was like, what's a product that I could do that if I did it would be hilarious? And so I saw that women are really into crystals. And it's sort of like this zodiac thing manifested into like jewelry, basically. And so they're like, have all these different crystals. And I said, okay, let me try this. And so I went online and I bought a bunch of wholesale crystals. So I still have them at my house because it didn't go so well. But so if anyone wants crystals, hit me up. I got some free crystals for you. Just pay shipping. And I bought a bunch of crystals and I saw that Adele was using it before she goes on stage. And Kim Kardashian, after she got robbed, said that crystals are lowering her anxiety and bringing her back, grounding her. And all these celebrities were using this. So I said, okay, there's some potential here. And so I started to slang crystals on Facebook. And it didn't work great, but actually I just didn't really know what working great really looked like or didn't look like. Again, I had all these ideas in my head of like, I should be getting a 3x plus ROAS on from day one. And really, I think honestly, if I had just optimized it a little more or been a little more confident in the venture, I probably could have got that to work too. And so, I spun this thing up, and within a week I had stuff for sale. And within 4 or 5 weeks, I was like, this is not like taking off. This is not easily just working. So I'm going to bounce.
Was there a dollar limit that you realized it's not working?
I was putting in, so I basically wanted to have statistically significant data on the ads. And so I think I was spending $250, $300 a day on the ads. This is a very small budget, I think. So maybe in total, let's see, across probably 30 days, that you could do the math and say, one of my rules, as you know, if you listen to the podcast, I don't do public math, but basically you can get a set for,
or 10 grand,
a couple $1,000s. Yeah. To test out this idea. Then again, probably $5,000 of product that I bought, and I ended up breaking even roughly on the product. And what I was looking for was something a lot better than break even on first purchase. And ironically, the business that we do now actually had the same metrics out the gate. I was just more committed because I did it with my wife. My wife is she's not like a startup guy just looking to pivot every 2 seconds. She's like, wait, we said we were going to do this. Do we not believe in this anymore? I'm like, no, we still believe. Like, she's like, okay, good. It took us so long to get this product made. There's like a longer lead time. So ironically, because the product was almost harder to do, and I was doing this with my wife, I was committed to pushing through the period where, the returns were good, not great. And the first one, I was looking for just a quick hit. What if this just instantaneously works amazingly? And it might have done that, but that was sort of an unrealistic expectation. But I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, that's the story of, I tested one product before that to figure out what the demand looks like. And ironically, the one that worked had pretty much the same results as the other. I was just more committed to like spending the next 6 months getting it to work better and better every single day. Which is like, if you're a growth professional, that's what you do, right? You sit there and you turn the knobs and you turn the knob. You have one overarching strategy, and then you got to sit there and try to do it well. Like, if Ben's doing content, I've seen their content is good and it's getting better. They had one content layer. Now they're adding audio. Now they're adding partnerships. They're adding all these other things to it. And like, that's the way to go.
Ben, are you guys running ads?
No, not at all. The only paid we're doing is paid placements on pods. But yeah, nothing.
Which is insane, by the way. That's an insane strategy. Like you are playing life on hard mode for yourself, and I get it. I respect it because it's a very like philosophically principle driven approach, and that's kind of amazing. And you're going to build a strength in your company, but you're building a strength because it's like the person who's like, I don't drive to work, I run only. I only run to places I need to go. And if I go get groceries, I run there and I run back with them. And it's like, wow, you're getting really good at running. You're really strong. But like, wow, that's also really difficult. Like, what would change your mind, Ben? Would you, if I ran a test, if you guys ran a test, you put $10,000 in and it printed out $40,000, would you stop? Or would you be like, yeah, okay, maybe this channel works? Like, what would you do?
Yeah, so it's very much a long lens. We did, like, full disclosure, we did a ton of paid with Skip, like lots. It was nonstop across every platform, where you get to the point where you're like, man, we've got more than 10,000 Facebook ads running at once. This is insane, because we had to be, for anybody that doesn't know, we were a geographically targeted marketplace. So everything was so nuanced. Anyways, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But the reason we don't with levels, A, we're in beta right now. B, it all comes down to opportunity cost of time and project debt, right? So the more mental energy we invest in running paid, like, we know we can run these experiments. We know that, like, we can do ads and we can see results from them. But being such a small team right now, it wouldn't allow us to run other absurd experiments. Like, what does it look like?
Let's just say an intern went rogue and just put up $10,000 of ads, and it printed out $40,000 money. It had a 4x return attributed in Facebook. Would you philosophically just say, you know what? We don't want to even get on this horse. Yeah, the journey might look good now, but we don't want to be on that horse. So stop it, intern. Do not do this thing that prints money. Like, turn the money printer off right now. Or is there any number that you would reconsider?
No. So that would be the answer. Like, I know it sounds absurd, because what we're focused on is the infrastructure. Like if we don't have the eng infrastructure, we don't have the ops infrastructure to handle growth. Like once
It's
we
more
get
of
to
a
that
supply
point,
problem then.
we like the wait list is at 155 right now.
Wow.
So it's like, it's pretty padded. And if we open the floodgates and we built the deck for 100 people, we're like, we know the nails are going to break at 100 people. And there are 1,000, like everything becomes exponentially harder and worse. So we are very much limiting growth. But here's like, to get back to the question of would we do it? So would we do it in Project Ed? So we're doing all these really weird things to experiment right now. We're creating content, not doing it consciously. Like somebody the other day, Sam and Casey and I recorded a podcast about Inbox Zero. We just talked about like Sam and I are, we triage email pretty quickly, and Casey has now adopted Inbox Zero as a mindset. And all these founders ended up, like founders and startup team members came and they're like, man, what's like, I just want to know the process. Like, what do you do? So we record Looms. Hey, this is me going through my inbox. This is how I triage it, show all the shortcuts. And all of a sudden, that's led to people DMing us about that content. And now these are people who want to work with us. So it's like these weird experiments where you go, sure, we could have got, let's say we had some insane return. Let's say it was a 10x return on paid. And we're like, from a revenue standpoint, that's great. But is it easier to do that or hire the most talented engineer or like name a role possible? And that happened because you ran some weird experiment. It just becomes this trade-off. So you're like, when we're ready to go and do paid, like we'll do it. But right now we're focused on building the product, building the team. And so we're doing all these random experiments that are turning into these unbelievable flywheels for recruiting talent. And it's like sort of an accident, but at the same time, not really, because we're investing time in doing it. It's just that we don't know the downstream, like the downstream effects and the byproduct of ripping through your inbox really fast and superhuman. And somebody's like, oh, now I want to work with this team. Like it's hilarious to see it, but that's sort of the way that we're thinking about it. And then in the end, you get that, like back to your point, you get to the point where the intern or like somebody comes in and now they're like, oh, we're going to run paid. And you're like, great. We got all the infra and you're the person to do it. And we didn't have to spend that much time recruiting because of these like weird things that we've been doing internally. So kind of hilarious, but very counterintuitive approach for sure.
I'm curious if any of you have any kind of consumer behaviors that you've seen change since lockdowns have maybe weakened and people are kind of going back. Like you said, Facebook isn't the only shelf, but it's kind of the easiest one to get started on. Now that people are like out and about again, have any of you noticed any serious behavior change, or is like, does it really matter anymore?
I mean, I think from a brand activation standpoint, there's definitely a lot more events happening. There's more pop-ups happening. There's more trying to get placement in retail. But I think like, I just have this thought in my head based on what Shaan was saying. Like, it's so true that like, if you know how to run the right types of ads and create the right types of site experiences, whether it's a good landing page or a good article or something like that. Shaan, you guys talked about the Sweetie article that I ran a few years ago on The Hustle on the podcast. Like, if you're good at tactically understanding what a consumer needs to go through in order to get them over the line or create FOMO to get that first purchase in the bag, I think you could really apply that to any platform, whether it's Facebook or Taboola or TikTok or Pinterest. And it just becomes more of an understanding, again, back to what I was saying earlier, like who is your customer and where do they consume and what apps do they have on their phone and what gives them FOMO and what drives them to want to purchase.
By the way, you should share that story about the Sweetie thing. That's a really great little,
I would love to share that
little
story.
tactic. So share that one.
Yeah. So I worked at a beverage company called Hint Water, which is a flavored water company based out of San Francisco. And they had this amazing founder story. But before I worked at Hint, I worked at a company called Gravity 4. Horrible online reputation. Founder had lots of lawsuits and legal issues and things of that nature. But anyways, what I was doing there was two sides to that business, the demand side and the supply side. I worked on the supply side. It was a programmatic ad business. So the goal was we're going to go out with apps. We had a URL shortener, a social sharing widget, kind of like Ad Now, or it was called Ad Now, kind of like add this or share this. We had an ESP, kind of like MailChimp. We had a social media management platform, which worked with the URL shortener, kind of like Buffer. And our whole goal was to go to publishers with large audiences, either get them to use our URL shortener or at least place our social sharing widget on their site. That way we could funnel in first-party data. So we could get, tons of information of gathering anonymous customer personas. It got housed in a DMP, which the best way to think of that is kind of like a big box of anonymized data. And then the third piece of that, which is on the demand side, is called a DSP. And companies like Walmart and TripAdvisor, who are clients, would basically activate the first-party data we would gather to better target their customers with ads and whatnot. I wasn't a huge fan of the way that programmatic was done, just because the way that I thought it was being sold was very scammy. And so I wanted to go on the supply side working with publishers. And so my job was essentially work with try to get the largest publishers on board, get them a social sharing widget. And so, my whole goal was getting social sharing widgets on like aplus.com, on Hypebeast, on random good sites to get good quality customers. What I learned was that the best sites for page views were those shitty sites at the bottom of TechCrunch articles that live in Taboola. That you won't believe what this celebrity looks like 27 years later. And they get the most page views because those guys are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, and then they're printing 3 times that in revenue. And so, anyways, I was doing that, and then something changed in the business, and it basically got to, all right, I have to figure out a way for the publisher side to make money. And so I went to all these clients that I had who were doing, 1 million to 10 million page views a day. And I said, hey, how about I run the same shit you're running on Taboola? I'll run it on Facebook. And they're like, we've tried it. It doesn't work. And I was like, all right, I'll do all the creative and messaging testing. You just give me the content with the highest revenue per slide, because these were mainly slideshows. And we had to rejigger some things, like, Facebook didn't like when you drove to a page that was cluttered in ads. Taboola didn't care. So we would run these different tests where we would lower the first slide's ads, and then, if somebody went 5 or 6 page views, like they were swimming in money. So I got really good at that. And essentially I think I helped Facebook ban clickbait, but, fast forward, then I leave that company. I end up working at Hint as their director of performance. I open up Facebook for the first time, and I'm reading the numbers, and it's like, all right, they're getting a $5 cost per click. They're paying $80 to acquire a customer. They're going to basically a very essentially one screen. It was all above the fold. And it was, try 2 cases of Hint, get 20% off. You get a watermelon still and a watermelon sparkling. And their max number, like their good days on D2C, were 80 customers a day. So those 3 metrics, again, are $5 CPC, $80 per customer, and 80 customers a day. Now, so I open this, and I come obviously from that scammy publisher world, and I'm thinking like, wow, these guys are paying $5 a click. I was getting, on a bad day, we were paying 5 cents a click. And so I started digging more and more into, what was there wasn't a lot of testing going on, but at the same time, the content was very limiting, right? If you have never seen the brand and you just see, try this and get 20% off, you're like, it's the equivalent of going up to somebody at a bar, not saying a word prior and being like, I'm going to marry you. It just doesn't work. And so that's when the hustle was actually starting. And I used to go to this event called Pizza and 40s that the hustle used to put on. They'd get these amazing founders, and they'd get them a little tipsy, and they would just share all their secrets around growth and what it's like hiring and firing and, picking talent and how they came up with their idea. And it was an awesome event. And at the time I had pitched the hustle on getting the Hint founder as a speaker. And so she spoke at an event and told the story about, how she started the company. It was doing well, but like not amazing. She tried to sell the company to Coca-Cola, and some Coke executive, in a very demeaning way, basically said, hey, sweetie, this isn't going to work. Americans love sweet. And so I reached it back out to Sam and said, hey, we'll give you 10% of revenue if you want to write this article. And it lives on the hustle. You guys don't have any programmatic ads, which is great. And, I feel like I learned how to write from Sam. So I'm a huge fan of the way Sam writes and the way he tells stories. And so Sam says, no, I want $5,000. I was like, all right. So we give him $5,000. The article goes up, and I'll actually link to it here in the chat so you guys can see it. There we go. And so this article goes up, and I say, all right, I'm going to try to run the same playbook that I was running with these shitty publishers. I'm going to try to kind of, border the line of clickbait and a good story. It's still valuable because it's a good story. And so we're going to put this article up, and we're going to run it from the hint page. Now, keep in mind, 8 months there was an 8-month gap where I had left the ad tech company and I joined Hint. And in those 8 months, I was actually a contractor for Hint, focused on building the CEO's personal brand. So now I also had a Facebook page that was verified, an Instagram page that was verified of the CEO. And so we basically launched this content coming from the CEO's Facebook page and the brand's Facebook page. Now, literally within a week, we go from those numbers I told you before, 5, 80, and 80, to 1,000 customers a day, $25 CPA, and we're doing, the cost per click is very low, probably like less than 10 cents. And then it goes 1,000, then it goes 2,000, then it goes 3,000. There were some days where I would wake up at 7 a.m., refresh Facebook. We've already spent our daily cap, which was $120,000, and it was all spent efficiently. And, I think we broke the Hustle site 2 or 3 times. We sold out our entire distribution center a couple times. And that article helped create a very pivotal moment for the Hint business, where we realized that we got to stop selling what we're selling, and we got to sell why we're selling it. And so instead of selling flavored water, we were selling the story of the founder who created this amazing business. Or instead of selling flavored water, we were selling the end to your Diet Coke addiction. And a lot of people are going off in the chat right now about Simon Sinek, and that's exactly what he says. But so many people never know how to apply it until you actually test it. And so anyways, then we realized, okay, this concept of what I call secondary presence, right? It's your ad spend, your first party ad spend, and your first party data, audience, and insights with third party validated content works really well to onboard new customers and drive trial, create FOMO. I mean, it works so well to a point where I think we have 45,000 shares on this article on Facebook that are completely organic. And the second thing that we realized was people were coming up to us in the office because they saw the Hint logo in San Francisco. The office is basically a retail space. People would come in and be like, wow, I just read about this founder on the internet. And so we knew this thing was actually working. It was telling a story that people cared about, and it brought the highest lifetime value customers. We had the biggest growth from one-time trial users to subscribers, literally like a hockey stick, from the cohort of people who came through piece of content, kind of like this. And the second version of what we did here was we worked with influencers to do something kind of similar, and I'm going to try to find this as I speak. But we went to influencers and creators, really vloggers on YouTube, because they're really good at talking to a camera and telling a story. And we said, hey, first we would seed the product. So we would say, here's, in this case, this girl, Sarah Dici. She's a YouTuber, tech YouTuber. We sent her whole tagline is Sarah Dici rhymes with peachy. I sent her 108 bottles of our peach flavored Hint water. And all of a sudden it shows up on her Instagram stories, her Twitter. There was a small clip of it in YouTube where she calls out LaCroix for never supporting creators. And so we said, all right, she clearly loves the product. I didn't even know her at the time. And she was posting all about it. And so she posted about it. We reached out and said, hey, can you create something where you talk about why you like the product, what got you into flavored water? She was a big LaCroix fan at the time. And almost as if you were kind of telling your friend like why they should stop drinking diet soda, because she was a big Dr. Pepper drinker. And so we created this Facebook video, and we did the same thing, right? So we whitelisted her account, we got her verified, and we started pushing it with ads, and the result was exactly the same. Our cost of acquisition went way down. We could take this one video and test it with 48 different headlines, 48 different versions of ad copy. And at the time, I don't know if the links work either in the Sweetie article or this video anymore, but at the time they would go to a very, direct response, very low funnel landing page where somebody's already bought into what they're going to buy and why they're going to try it. It was just about getting them to hit add to cart and purchase. So that's kind of the Sweetie and the secondary present story.
So how could because Ben's making tons of content over at Levels, what would that look like right now for them to figure that out? Or Ben, do you already do that in any capacity?
Yeah, I mean, we've got our loop for content sharing is we'll call it the magic moment, right? So the first time anybody uses the product and they look and they're like, holy smokes, I had no idea I've eaten X, Y, and Z, or I've consumed, I drink Coke every day and I didn't realize it was this detrimental to my health. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic about it, but it's somewhat eye-opening when people are like, man, I'm healthy, I promise you. And then they start to see this feedback loop of data. And a lot of times, not for everyone, because not everyone wants to participate in sharing their data and doing all these things, but a lot of times people feel this sense of need to share this content with the world, right? And again, I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's they feel it is their duty to educate the world. Look, man, you got to stop eating a donut every day. It is, I don't want to say killing you, but over time, it's got major health implications for your lifespan and health span. I have to share this data and show people to stop eating this. Where it ends up going is that you get, there's this one guy, Austin McGuffey, he's killer content creator, and he makes all these hilarious videos on YouTube. He's called the Metabolism Mentor, and he's got Casamigos versus my metabolism. He's got oatmeal versus my metabolism. And he's just doing it out of his intrinsic will to be like, I have to educate my community, people who follow me, about what's going on. Now extrapolate that really wide and you get the Sarah Dietschy story over and over and over again. And then exactly what Nick did, where instead of investing the time or the money in, let's say, doing something through digital platforms for paid ads, you go, I'm going to spend all my time and money on sending 108 cases of this flavored water to her. And that gets such a better long-term return. And she actually loves the brand, loves the product, loves the story, loves telling people the story so much that becomes exponentially more valuable in content than just trying to compete for the initial conversion. Because the initial conversion is great when you've got a transactional product, but not an emotional one. And what we're building has so much deep emotion and so much long-term value. Long-term value being people have way more years to live than they think they do if they start to take care of themselves. And so if we can create a platform where people come to Levels because we are the health hub, if you want to call it that, where you can start to get data and biometric data and insights, call it bioobservability. We are the check engine light for your body, same as a car. If we become that place and all your data is aggregated there, then everybody's going to be like, man, I am here because this is creating value, and it doesn't have anything to do with cost, because 1 year of my life is worth more than $300, right? If you could start to say, man, okay, 20 years of life, $300 a year, we're not going to go into Sean's math, but right. So you'll say $6,000 to actually $6,000 to actually live 20 more years. People how do I sign up right now? I'm in. It becomes a non-starter as far as a conversation, because we're always trying to create more value than we're trying to capture. And that gets back to this idea of we don't sell CGMs. We're just trying to educate people about metabolic health and its importance. And so that's that's the riff on where all of this stems from with content in this loop.
Right on. We're getting close to the end. So let's get really tactical for a little bit, and let's try and brainstorm how we'd actually grow a D2C brand using kind of the stuff we just described. Do we have a specific? Why don't we talk about this NFT frame behind Shaan that everyone's loving? What if we were selling this moving picture frame? Where would we start? What would be the first 3 steps we take?
Selling anything crypto is simple. Crypto people are flush with cash and looking to spend anything that lets them, especially NFTs, right? I think this is almost fish in a barrel, where you have people who have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on their digital art and they can't display it. And so all you need to let them know is that this is, so the problem is these are branded as smart screens and like all this other shit. They don't use the words that you need to use, which is that this is a NFT frame, and they should be branding it as an NFT frame, and they should be selling it as such to all the NFT collectors that are out there. And so you would say, where are my customers? Where do they hang out? They hang out in Discord. They hang out on Twitter for the most part. Okay, cool. So I'm going to need to advertise in those 2 places. Then you take Ben's approach. You say, well, I'm not just going to be a frame seller. I'm going to educate them on something. So I'm going to educate them on, I don't know, the benefits of displaying your art, about how to actually link up the thing, about, I don't know, whatever. So it's probably not too much education here. It's pretty straightforward. And then what Nick is saying basically is, instead of running the ad saying buy 2 cases of Hint, you take the most entertaining content that you have, the best story you have to tell, and then you run paid ads behind that. So we might have a story around the frame, which is, why I spent $400,000 on this JPEG, and it's a remarkable story. It gets me curious. Why are people spending $500,000 on digital pictures that you could just right click save as? And then you take that story and you sell that instead of the frame, right? And you talk about, in that story, you talk about how, before, people couldn't even display these, but now that people can display them, it's going to be just as popular as art. The art market is humongous, and it gives me joy every time I walk by, and every time I'm on a Zoom, people say, "What's that swinging thing behind you?" And it's a great conversation starter. Blah blah blah. And so you would basically, that's the combination of the approaches, right? Ben's approach is sell through education, right? Educate first, sell later. Nick's approach is don't run ads just as, here's my product, buy my product. Take your most entertaining, interesting piece of content, whether it's about your founder or about, some outrage driving thing that happened, like, some condescending prick at Coca-Cola saying, sweetie, this is never going to work. Run ads at that content, and it'll get people familiar with the brand. And mine is very simple, which is run ads, scalable growth channel that there is. I can predictably turn a knob on my business and say, I'd like to grow 20% this month. I'd like to grow 50% this month. I'd like to keep growing from, I don't want to stop at 12 million. I want to go to 26 million next year and 84 million the year after that. Well, I know how I can do that because this channel does have that level of scale that maybe podcasts and maybe some other channels don't have that type of scale.
Yeah, I think I would agree. One thing I've also realized that works really well on the, especially in the Facebook world, where I still think is the best place to go get your first 1,000 customers, unless you have a pre-existing audience, is creating some kind of like, guys, it's us against some institution that is fucking us over. That kind of creating that kind of scenario does really well. We have a company right now that we're working on launching in actually later this month, and it's all around cleaner water. And so we've created this whole narrative of it's us against the the government that regulates our water and has made such a bad or has kept the standards so low that it's actually hurting us, and the government's hurting us. And I think on an average day we have a 60% conversion from click to sign up.
Whoa. Are there any parts of that landing page that stand out as being like especially effective?
So what we did for that one is, again, we were running people through a story. But, and then the landing page too is very, very like conversion optimized. I mean, our team is watching user sessions on a daily basis, looking at where the mouse is going, looking where people are stopping. And then we're constantly iterating and testing. So it's not also as easy as like set up one story and you're hitting gold. It's a ton of testing, and kind of like Shaan said earlier, you have this macro strategy, but it's just about every day, how do you improve it 1%?
Ben, I'm curious, because you're not running like ads and things like that, your daily metrics are probably a lot different than looking at CPCs and like AOV and everything like that. Like what's your guiding metrics when you're kind of more on the content side? Like what do you look at day to day as a head of growth?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many pieces of content that we're doing that we also try not to anchor too much on the short term. So we very much have a data informed versus a data driven lens. Reason being is that we've got this internal podcast that we created that has now gotten engagement with all these random people, and we've had on thought leaders and we've had on internal team members, and we talk about all this random stuff. The episodes that might not perform from an analytics standpoint, like let's say they don't have as many downloads as a thought leader. You have on a thought leader, of course it's going to perform higher. What if that one ended up helping you getting back to that 10x engineer or whomever it is, like somebody who's just such a killer candidate that you go, this would have been impossible. This would have taken us 12 months to recruit anybody that is of this caliber, right? So we're looking at the metrics that we look at aren't overly granular from a content perspective. We know that there are certain things that we should pay attention to and certain things we should ignore. So when we're running paid placements on podcasts or if we're doing newsletter placements, like, sure, of course, we're looking at ROAS and we're looking at CAC and we're looking at all of these things. We're going, is the long game of having this person as a partner, if we're trying to put attribution to it, let's say Dave Asprey, Mark Hyman, right? Like some of the bigger names in health and wellness or biohacking. It's hard to say, here's the attribution associated with that one podcast episode because of the links that we're setting up. And what we're doing is we're still saying, like, who gives a shit? Who really cares? Because they're helping to educate the world for 60 minutes or 90 minutes about this thing. And the attribution might not be trackable or traceable because somebody converted 6 months later because they ended up signing up for the newsletter, signing up to just receive more content. They went down their path. They converted more of their friends and family to be interested in this space. It ends up being a long game. So our immediate day-to-day metrics, sure, we'll look at revenue. We'll not something that we're paying attention to, but it's still important to say, how are we tracking this week, right? How are we tracking this month? But we're not looking at all of these things. What are the vanity metrics of the impressions created from that one post we put out where we had Mark Hyman give some name drop for levels. It's yeah, that's cool, but it's also just such an arbitrary measure to anchor on. And then that gets back, and this is my rant about it. It gets back to carrying around, letting things occupy the real estate in your mind for free, that you're oh man, I really have to go check those impressions on that silly post. It's that stuff's in the past. Sure, know whether or not it's performing, but free up your mind so that you can do silly looms of processing email on Superhuman, extrapolate that as an experiment moving forward. And all of a sudden your mind is free to run these experiments. And it gets to this longer game of going, wow, here's a path that we're on and here's what we're doing. So our metrics are not, they're not concrete. They're not things that you would typically see from a growth function within a company, but that's what makes it pretty fun.
Gives you some time to play guitar in the background.
There's not a lot of time for that.
All right, let's spend the last 5 minutes talking about churn, and then we can wrap up and let people know where the projects you guys are working on. So, Ben, I think Levels is maybe one of the stickiest products you could possibly have. It's literally an adhesive to the back of your arm that's under your skin. That's pretty hard to get rid of. I know I've got a Whoop thing. I've worn this for a year already. They just sent me a notification being congrats, you've been a member for a year, which is crazy. I don't think I've used anything else for a year. How did you design that? I mean, that's kind of an easy question because it's under your skin. But if you had a less day-to-day product, maybe something you use every 2 weeks or every month, how would you go about keeping people on board to get them that second, third, fourth, lifetime customer retention style there? And Nick and Shaan, if you have anything you want to add.
It all depends on the product. 100% it does. It's so hard to answer that as a concrete takeaway, because let's go back to Shaan's frame, and why to run ads without getting too deep into it. It's for us, if we were going to run ads on something that you need to educate people about, that's so much harder to do just through hey, here's an awareness play. We're testing this exact media on this platform, and here's how it's performing. Something like a frame is so transactional that people are I get what it does. I understand an NFT. It's much easier to get that conversion around it. So how would we, depending on the product, how would we get people to not churn on Levels versus something like a frame? Totally different product. For us, if we just use that as the example, we have to show people that they're getting such value out of the data that it is improving their health. And we have to continue down that. Like, I don't mean to like keep going on the education path, but it's like, we have to show what the value of using the product is to them from an intrinsic standpoint, because that is all it matters, right?
Yeah.
If they can,
especially because it's like a one-time like renewal of $500 to get like another year's worth of this, right?
Yeah. And like, let's go down a segment in the vertical. So we call them in personas, we call it the discouraged dieter. These are people who have figured out that using a CGM helps them lose weight. Well, their willingness to pay is basically inelastic, right? So as soon as they get that feedback loop, like, man, I've been trying to lose weight for 20 years. This thing has now helped me start to lose weight. Your willingness to pay basically inelastic. You're like, I'm going to keep paying till I get down to my targeted weight. That is the stickiness there. So every persona, every vertical that we are going after, all these segments, they have such different approaches. It's a much harder game to play, right? The value prop to the biohacker, accountability. The value prop to the discouraged dieter, losing weight. The value prop to the, and we can't target women who are pregnant right now, but the value prop is not having gestational diabetes. Like, very different approaches and how you'd go down those paths. Full circle back to like why it's very hard to play the paid game right now, because you have to be very sure about who you're targeting and what the messaging is. Lots of experimentation, and yeah, it's really interesting.
Sweet.
I would say I actually completely agree with Ben. You know, different personas require different messaging. And if they come in on the right message, you can get somebody, you could have two people of the same persona, and one comes in on a message that is going to keep them around for 8 months versus one comes in and on a different message and they'll only stick around for 2 months. But I think there's two main things. One is you just have to have a phenomenal product. Like, good products just don't work anymore. They have to be really great products. And by that, I mean, they have to add some sort of value. Like, Stuart, you and I both use Whoop because every morning we look for that green recovery score, and that's the value we get out of it. The second thing is it's got to be something that ideally works in a routine or has some kind of repeat mechanism. If you have those two, you can layer tech on top, whether it's a batch QR code, whether it's a really good Facebook ads retention campaign to get that second or third purchase or get them into subscription, or a really good Klaviyo flow. But you have to have an amazing product, and it has to be something that delivers a ton of value to the end consumer, and ideally something that fits in to somebody's daily routine or weekly routine, or helps them get better.
Sweet. Anything to add there, Shaan, or you want to let people know what you're working on and where they can hear more about you?
No, nothing to add. I think, these guys hit it on the head. You got to have a great product, and then you got to have the right value prop for that person. So that's 101. That's great. But 101 doesn't mean skip forward, go to 102. 101 means spend the next 10 years of your life seeing if you can get that right. Yeah. That's the best part about marketing is people are in search of the most complicated, I need the nuanced growth strategies. And it's like, well, actually, have you done the basics right? Did you figure out who your customer is? Did you figure out what they want? Did you figure out how to message it to them? And then are you doing that consistently, and are you delivering on the promise? So, that's the game. It doesn't really need to be more complicated than that. The beauty, the magic is in spending 10 years of your life trying to get really great at doing that.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, take your time telling us about where people can learn more about your work and reach out if you want.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, my Twitter, I'll just put it in the chat here. Is Shaan VP. And then if you like kind of more detailed breakdowns of stuff like marketing tactics, business stories, things like that, I do a newsletter on just my name, ShaanPuri.com. So subscribe to that.
I will also plug both those things. My Twitter is probably the best place to get a hold of me, or DM, and also I'll plug my Sunday email, which is also marketing breakdowns, tactical stuff, and case studies.
And best place to check out levelshealth.com. If you're on the wait list and you want to skip the line, you can use levels.link / my last name, so Grynol. best place to connect is Twitter. And if you're curious about what we're building internally and some of the weird, funny, riffy conversations that we have, we've got a podcast called The Whole New Level. And so check that out. And then the blog has all the content related to metabolic health. So love to connect.
Sweet. Thanks a lot, guys. And if anyone listening is interested in joining Demand Curve's growth marketing community, it's that big black button at the top of the screen. Hit that and you'll get an invite to it. Thanks a lot, guys. Super great. I'll see you guys backstage. And everyone stick around. In about 7 minutes, we'll be going into the agency growth session. So we'll see you then. Thanks a lot. See ya.